Hello, everybody. It is I, Alejandro Rojas, your host here for UFOs Seriously Live. So, I am a journalist. I've written about UFOs for a long time. I'm also a paranormal kind of researcher. I've been out there investigating stuff for quite some time. My stories have been all over the place. I've been in the Washington Post, the New York Times, all over. So, I get on television shows once in a while. That's why I am taking the liberty of being able to create a live show where I can espouse my UFO knowledge and cover the UFO news of the week. But I'm also going to share with you some new investigations that I've done and also my Project Blue Book review, which also includes some UFO investigation work. So we'll get into that momentarily here. But I do want to say this is called UFO Seriously Live because it's more of a serious take. We're not speculating. We're kind of getting into some speculation and stuff like that, but that's not what this is about. We're looking at credible information. We're looking at facts. We're looking at figures. Less speculation. I mean, there's a lot of people speculating about, the Ashtar Command or what have you, and who knows? Maybe there is an Ashtar Command. I don't know that. We're going to talk about the facts at hand, and especially since the government has revealed they had a secret UFO program, we'll get into some of that too, that, there's more people looking for credible information. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to show you, don't worry, some people are saying, oh man, they just advertise so much. It's like, when people watch YouTubes and they see other people's commercials, they're fine. But when you try to, tell people what they can look at that you're promoting, they get, oh man, this is just a big ad. But that's not the case. There's something here I want to show you, some original research here at the UFO Congress website page. So you can find this at ufocongress.com. This is a great conference, as it said, the Guinness World Record holder for the largest UFO conference. This is getting underway. We're going to have speakers listed for this conference coming up. Now, it is populous. There are a lot of speculators that come to this, and it is more about speculating and kind of looking at all the broader view of what people believe out there. And who knows who's right, really, when it comes to it. But these are all serious people. They're not liars. I mean, these aren't charlatans. We vet these people to make sure that they're accurate. And I'm chuckling because I'm about to share a story with you of some research where we found out one of the speakers wasn't that honest. But at least it shows we're honest because we're outing him in a way. So I want to show you this website just real quick. Information about when it's going to be, where it's at. It's going to be September 4th through the 8th, 2019, downtown Phoenix. Get on the email list for updates. Also, all the cool store stuff. In fact, look at this. You might recognize this. Ooh, hats, jewelry. Hey, look, that's the UFO over my shoulder right there. UFO video portal. If you want to watch lectures from UFO researchers, you can go here and do that at any time. Luis Elizondo, who we're going to be talking about, he ran the Pentagon UFO project, and we had an exclusive interview with him soon after he came out at the UFO Congress because we're buds. In fact, I'm going to be interviewing him on my podcast real soon here, hopefully next week. But this is what I wanted to get to. So we've got some blog posts down here, including my review of Project Blue Book, and we'll get to that. Here's my latest podcast, but I wanted to share this with you. This is something unique and exclusive to the Congress, which is, you may have seen this guy around. He was a speaker at the Congress. He was calling himself Dr. Ken Johnston, and he's got this outfit that is a NASA outfit, but actually, I went to space camp, and I have pretty much the same exact outfit. I did wear it, actually, at San Diego Comic-Con when I did a presentation right before an actual astronaut. And because I was wearing my space camp one, he wore his real one from NASA. But this is not really necessarily a real one either. Now, Ken was an engineer, and he was an electrician on the Apollo project. He worked with NASA on some outreach projects with children and for education. So he's done some great things. But, I ran across an investigation from this space writer named James Oberg, who says, hey, he seems like a nice guy. Everybody says he's nice. He's done some great stuff. But he's calling himself a doctor, and he's not. And so I did some investigation. I even said, hey, Ken, can you send me, your diploma and some information about this? And he's got 2 diplomas out there. There's one in his book called Ken's Moon. And then he also sent me this one here. This one said it's for a Doctor of Metaphysics at the Reformed Baptist Theology Seminary. The other one that is in his book is for a Doctor of Divinity. That one is dated 1985, even though the caption in the book says 1981. Here you can see on this one, 1987, and they all read January 1st, so it's kind of suspicious. What is that all about? So his rep, guy told me it was from RBS, which stands for the Reformed Baptist Seminary, which is a very respectable organization. I actually called them and said, hey, do you have doctor of this or that? I didn't see that listed in their academic material. They said, no, we don't have any doctor of anything, but let me look into see if there was something to that effect in the past. So I waited, but in the meantime, I noticed that this says the actual organization is a Reformed Baptist Seminary, where look at this, it says Reformed Baptist Theology Seminary. Also, in this stamp, you see Colorado Reformed Baptist Church. So I did some research, and I found some people saying that this is a total scam. This is not a real organization. It's actually ran by a company named owned by a guy named William Conklin, who's been caught in a bunch of scams. So I have links to these here. And then I also read the work of James Oberg, who actually contacted this William Conklin. And he said, well, this was just a money-making thing. That I'm not accredited or anything. There was no classes or anything. You just paid a few bucks, and then we gave you a degree. I actually got a call back from the Reformed Baptist Seminary, and I heard from the actual Dr. Robert Gonzalez, who's the dean. And he said, no, we do not have any doctor of this or that. He said nobody should be, even if they had received something from us, be calling themselves a doctor. He said he's only aware of actual PhDs using the term doctor legitimately, including himself. He has a PhD. He also said he's heard of Conklin, who he says was a scammer that ran a degree mill. He called that organization completely bogus. So I did ask Ken. I told him about what I found and everything, and he apologized, and he said he did not seek to deceive anybody. He was deceived himself by Mr. Conklin, although I would warn anybody, you can't get a PhD by just mailing away, $100 and getting one, and despite what the organization you're talking to tells you. So just be aware of that, and I wanted to make sure we made that clear, because we had doctor in his title, in his lecture, and on the DVDs when that is not accurate. So essentially, when we did this investigation months ago, right after the last Congress, but we only released this now because we felt we had to, come clean and make sure that everybody knew we're being legit here, that we were not aware that was not he wasn't actually a doctor. So we wanted to make sure that was clear. So not to defame anybody, but I would recommend that everybody in this link is Oberg's presentation on other incongruencies with some of the claims that Mr. Johnston has regarding his research. And you can read that right here on this link. So James Oberg is a very famous space writer. In fact, we're going to be talking about him more in a little bit here. Totally legit dude. A lot of people consider him a debunker because he often comes onto our website, openminds.tv, and makes comments. And he makes comments on my stories quite often. But he said, because he appreciates that I'm trying to find the truth, and he is as well. And he has an interest in the topic, so he does read what he feels is the legitimate stuff regarding UFOs out there. So yeah, so you'll find other cool stuff right here in our blog. I would highly recommend you get on the email list so you can be updated with information. And we've got some exciting speakers coming up, so you're going to want to check that out. But let's go over to the openminds.tv website. We're going to be following this for the most part here. We're going to look at these headlines because there's some important ones here, but I want to cover a couple things. And in fact, let's go to the Project Blue Book review because there's some cool stories in here. Actually, this is just a little sentence about how, about the show, but my actual review is on Den of Geek, a super cool website that covers sci-fi fiction. And as I write here, much of what Project Blue Book is doing lately on the TV show is sci-fi fiction. As I say here, Blue Book continues to stray from actual history as the storyline gets much more ominous, and it certainly does. So this episode was called Foo Fighters. All of the episode titles are based off of real UFO events. Foo Fighters were the name for these objects that were being seen during World War II by Allied, and it turned out, I guess, the Germans said they had also seen them. I can't remember the Russians also. There's some experts on this and some books out there you should check out, and I've got some links to those in these stories. But essentially, these World War II guys were seeing these balls of light. When they saw them during the day, they said they looked like metallic balls that were flying around the ships. I know of at least one account where, the pilot said he saw them and he thought they were toast. He thought this is some kind of German bomb that's going to bomb us. We're screwed. I'm going to adjust this because you guys might be hearing that noise there. He thought, whatever this is, it's going to destroy us. But luckily it didn't. But they didn't know what they were. These things would fly around them and just fly around kind of like they were observing them or something. But they wouldn't get hurt. These were reported back. There have been some reports in history that you could read about kind of an analysis of what they were. There's at least one military report where they said they weren't theirs, they weren't ours. We don't know what they were. There are a couple other reports out there where they speculated these were actually experimental craft, jet-powered little metallic balls, which actually, honestly, does not even seem possible. We don't have any records of any schematics to show how these things may have operated, if indeed they were some sort of experimental German craft. And they said they were called foo bombs. In fact, I've got a link down here. Really, the beginning part is a review of the episode. You can read that if you want to hear just me review the episode and kind of highlight some of the most important parts. But when you get to the bottom, that's when we get to the real stuff. And in one of these links that I share is a link back to an Open Mind story written by Michael Schratt, where he was convinced actually it was these foo bombs. And he references these documents that are out there where this Italian guy said essentially that these were real. But there aren't any schematics. I don't know. I'm skeptical of that answer personally. I've also got a link here to a bunch of the newspaper clippings because a lot of these stories about these Foo Fighters did get into the news, and you can imagine they made some headlines. Really interesting stuff. So the Foo Fighters were a real deal. Now, in the episode, these pilots who reported Foo Fighters were debriefed, their minds were screwed with, and their memories were erased, and they were dishonorably discharged. And that didn't happen. The pilots who reported these things certainly didn't have any negative things. In fact, in World War II, and even in the early 40s and in the 50s, there wasn't this giggle factor. There wasn't this negative view towards UFOs as large. There was in the scientific community. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who of course this show is about, talked about that. He said he bought into this kind of negative perspective on UFOs that the scientific community had, but he regretted that later in his life. But really, people weren't like the show, kicked out of the Air Force or their brains were messed with or anything like that. So that is not accurate with the show. In the show, then they also try to talk to aliens, and in the show they also had this part where essentially these guys, in order to find other people that were like-minded, were creating this radio broadcast. And they're going to play an interesting point in here because also, along with the Foo Fighters being real, even though no one and these guys didn't have their brains washed in real life, there is an incident in the Air Force files, or at least in the occurrences or claims, where there is a colonel who says he believes his guys were drugged and maybe their minds were messed with. And this, what I am referring to, is a Rendlesham Forest case. Many of you are probably aware of this. This happened outside of the gates of Bentwaters Royal Air Force Base, and I review that in here. Essentially, there were lights seen outside the Bentwaters Air Force Base in the forest, which was called Rendlesham Forest. 3 security personnel were sent out there to take a look. They couldn't take weapons off base since it was the base was leased to the Americans, but the Americans weren't allowed to take arms out into UK territory off base. So they go off base on a Jeep towards one of these bright lights in the forest. One of the guys stays in the Jeep because he's honestly a little scared. The other 2 move towards the object. One of them gets frightened, so he holds back. The third makes it all the way to the object, actually touches it and walks around it. He said it was a triangular craft that was hovering above the ground. It was about 6 feet long. It then moved up above the tree line and then shot off, like we hear so much about. Well, the deputy base commander heard about this, and his name was Charles Halton. He said, that's silly. There had to be some sort of mundane explanation. But he said, if this happens again, I'm going to go out there with some men, and I'm going to show you guys what this really is, that you're being silly, that this is something strange. Sure enough, a couple nights later, he's able to do that. The lights come back. He goes out into the forest with his men, and his mind is blown. So essentially what happens is they see these lights in the forest. They follow them. They don't know what they are. They break out from one big light into 6 or 7 smaller lights and fly away. At one point, he sees this bright light over the weapon storage area. It beams some kind of laser-like light down into the weapon storage area. What wasn't known at the time was that it wasn't even legal, and it was secret that they had nuclear weapons in that storage area, but this light then came over the men. Halt and his men beamed a light down at their feet. Well, years later, in my own interview that I linked to here, Halt tells me that his men told him that when they were debriefed, sodium pentothal was used with them, and he thinks their minds were messed with. So, and he said that to me. I've got it on my podcast here, and I've written stories about that. So that's what that's about. But there's another interesting story here that many of you know about Rendlesham Forest, but you probably don't know about this one. And this is the voice of Rillan. Rillan, maybe is how you say it. This is a crazy story. So in the episode, it's kind of creepy where Hynek listens in on the radio and tunes in to these weird numbers, and there's this voice saying, the arrival is happening, and it's very ominous. And so he follows the voice to figure out who was sending this transmission, and it turned out to be, these former Air Force guys who saw the Foo Fighters and were kicked out of the Air Force. In real life, that didn't happen. However, there was a strange broadcast signal type of situation from aliens that did happen in the past. In 1977, in Britain, there was the Southern Television Evening News was being shown. So it was only these people that were watching Southern Television, which was a lot of people, and they were watching the news. This was November 26th, when the screen got wobbly and the audio changed from the newscast to this voice. This voice said, "This is the voice of Rillan." It probably had an English accent, but I don't want to make you listen to my English accent, at least not now. I'm sure if you listen to my podcast, sometimes I can't help myself. But the voice said, "This is Rillan, a representative of the Ashtar Command speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights in the sky. We speak to you now in peace and wisdom, as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth." That's kind of fun to talk like that. But it went on to say more stuff. If you click this link that I provided here, you'll see a story on a popular UK paper called The Independent, and they actually have documented in here the entire thing that this voice had said. It went on for about 6 minutes, and then it was gone. So in this story, it says, it was a hoax, of course, a prank. Most likely it was, but actually, we don't know for sure because they never found out. Nobody claimed to say, hey, that was me, it was us that hoaxed it, nor did they find out how it was done. So it's still kind of a mystery. No one knows who did this or what happened, at least as far as I know. If you know differently, let me know, because even this story and everything I've seen, they never figured out what that was all about. So that was a really cool one. So interesting stuff there, and you'll find that in my Den of Geek story. Let's see. Let's go back to Open Minds. While we're doing this too, I want to... Okay, so we'll get into that in a minute. But let's get into... See if you guys have anything you're talking about here. Isn't sodium pentothal truth serum? I believe it is. I think some people believe it can also be used for like mind control stuff, to kind of loosen up the mind and to give people suggestions. Somebody said you can't claim it's a hoax if it's not falsified. I think that's a really good point. As a journalist, I think that's kind of sloppy. If, for instance, in my story, I said many believe it to be a hoax. However, it was never discovered who did it. That's accurate. You could even say, it's assumed that it's a hoax, but you can't say for certain if it's a hoax if you don't know that for sure, I would say. Sodium pentothal is also what somebody used to write most of their novels. Steve Padilla says, hi. Hey, Steve. Any truth to that radio device from the Blue Book episode? Okay, great question. So what those Air Force guys did was create this antenna to shoot radio waves up into the sky in order to see UFOs. And they invited Hynek out into the forest, and they went and looked at these. They shot the radio antenna up there, and they did see lights, but Hynek said, no, that's probably not UFOs. I think that this is probably reflection from truck lights. And, they weren't coming close or anything, and the guys got really mad that he did that. Has that happened? She's talking about Philip K. Dick, who's a famous sci-fi writer. So he was on sodium pentothal when he wrote, wow. But I would say no, not necessarily. However, there have been times in the past where, especially even Alexander Bell and Tesla were getting signals when they invented radio. And they didn't know where those signals were coming from. And Tesla supposedly believed they were from Mars. And I guess that Alexander Graham Bell, or not Graham, yeah, I think it was Alexander Graham Bell. I've got a story on this, I know, on Huffington Post even. There was a book written about it. He thought maybe they were ghost voices. So there has been times where radio signals have been observed that they don't know where they're from. So someone said signals from space are cool. I would agree, my friend. I would definitely agree. But let's get into back into the browser and look at some of the other stuff going on here. The other thing going on here is Nick Pope. So I think we talked about this before, but I got to interview Nick Pope recently in my last podcast, and he's important because he used to work for the Ministry of Defense investigating UFOs. Now, some people kind of try to pick apart his, there was no UFO department or something. But he did. He really did investigate UFO sightings for the UK. They investigated UFO sightings up until 2008. Now, the UK government did not believe that UFO posed a threat. Nick Pope disagrees. He believes that they were a genuine mystery, something flying around in UK and everywhere else. But of course, the Ministry of Defense is only worried about the UK. That there were things flying around over the UK, and they didn't know what they were. So that does pose a threat. And so he's been in the UFO field for a long time. Well, he got these documents. I think it was really the American Federation of Scientists. They also got these documents via a FOIA. Nick, probably because of their work, was able to contact the U.S. Air Force directly, or at least the DOD directly. He outlines the details in this podcast, and then get these documents also. These documents are very similar to documents we've gotten in the past, but here's the difference. Nick noticed in another, and we talked about this in another podcast, that there was congressional briefing information, and one of these subcommittees said that they got a letter or wanted to know more about ATIP, this supposed UFO program. So they got information about it and these papers that were a result of it. In fact, you can kind of see that in the background here. And these papers have a lot to do with space and space technology and things like that, which are really interesting. What the point, though, that is Nick is making, and actually, let me bring that up because I have, let's see, my ATIP files here so I can get to them quickly. Oh, and I don't have a link there. Well, I'll just have to tell you about them. But I do have, what if Nick has them? I should link to those files. I'll do that. But in these files, they're essentially referencing what ATIP does. And they talk about ATIP. One of the things they analyze is foreign technology from here to the next 40 years. So Nick's point is, okay, what is the foreign government then that they're referring to when they say foreign technology? Well, if you look at these documents that they say that they showed that ATIP was looking into, they're talking about space. One of the things they're talking about is the Drake equation, which is this equation a scientist came up with to estimate how many extraterrestrial civilizations may be out there. So it's obvious from these documents that they're looking at things other than foreign governments as we know them, such as Russia and Chinese, which he is saying not is proof that the government was looking into UFOs, because these are really the first official documents that we have gotten out of that organization. But he says this supports what Harry Reid, Lou Elizondo, all of the people with Bigelow Aerospace who were essentially contracted to do this research for the DoD. It supports what all of them have been saying, is that even though they talked about advanced weaponry, foreign weaponry, they knew what they were looking for was essentially UFOs. The foreign power were these UFOs. Who is that foreign power behind the UFOs? They don't know. Lou Elizondo has said that often. He doesn't know in that interview I just showed you. But they do believe there is an intelligence behind some of these UFO sightings. And that's the mystery. That's the UFO mystery. I'll have Lou Elizondo on hopefully next week on my podcast. We're supposed to, but very soon. And we'll be talking about some of this stuff. But Nick and I talk about this. Lou Elizondo has not been able to share a whole lot about what went on in that government program because much of it is still secret. He can only share certain things. But he was really happy with these revelations, especially related to what Nick Pope did, because now he can actually, now that it's officially documented that these different topics were part of the program, he can talk about some of those things he did not feel at liberty to speak to. So that's why these documents are important. Do they have any major revelation we didn't know? Not really, because we had leaked documents that said the same thing. But what it does show is that those leaked documents that we've gotten, at least one set, was accurate. And what Lou and others have been saying has also been accurate. So it's another kind of official support of what they have been saying. What's interesting is the media, the government, obviously, because many of these individuals have been asked to speak to subcommittees for Congress. They haven't doubted any of this. But we've got a bunch of goofballs out there. some of them may be listening in the UFO community that keep telling me that, oh, Lou Elizondo's lying. He's the only one saying this stuff. No, he's not the only one saying this stuff. The guy who obtained the funding in the first place, Harry Reid, is saying this stuff. The other people cited as authors in these documents is saying this stuff. I'm not saying, hey, maybe there is some slight possibilities they're all fooling us or something. But certainly we don't have evidence of that. And this is just more information that supports what they're saying. And as I've said before, if Lou's fooling us, and he's fooled me too. I've had many personal conversations with him. He comes across as very credible to me. And he comes across as credible to my next podcast. So when I talk about Lou being on, it'll be the one after the next one. The next one is Rich Hoffman, who actually works at the Redstone Arsenal doing IT. So he works for the DoD himself as a contractor doing IT work. And he's also been investigating UFOs for decades. But what he said in the past, and we talk about this in the next podcast, which is centered around scientific UFO research and a project actually that the Scientific Coalition for Ufology is kind of working with Lou on to bring scientists together to kind of talk about UFOs, which is happening, and you'll hear about that in the next podcast. But what Rich said is he knows these guys. You know, you can tell these true blue patriots who are mostly selfless, who are looking for, you know, not only to protect the country, but to also, you know, in this case, protect the country in whichever way they can. And in Lou's perspective, it's to figure out the UFO phenomena. It's one way to do that. So exciting stuff. Let's look at what you all have to say. Somebody says they think that Nick Pope, I think they're saying, is a disinfo agent. Let's see. Somebody said, I wish I did both shows live. It's so hard to do live shows. So I'm sorry about that. I'm the only place for nobody else is doing UFO news. I don't know why. There's so much interesting stuff out there. It's so important to talk about the UFO news. Ooh, this is fun. Okay, somebody says that I'm part of Majestic 12. They're probably kidding, which is not as exciting. If they think that I really am part of MJ 12, that would be exciting. But others have said, I think that they're saying Nick Pope is disinfo, or maybe Lou Elizondo. I'm not sure. But let's get into this. So, people have claimed that Nick Pope is a disinfo agent, that he worked for the government, so now he's putting out information for the government to trick us all. Here's the problem with that theory. Nick Pope, because of his credibility, is one of the few people that gets on mainstream news on a regular basis. He's been on Fox News on a regular basis. He's been on CNN many times. And he is bringing legit, hardcore UFO stuff. He is sharing some of the most compelling and interesting UFO information out there to these mainstream news outlets. And no doubt having a great effect on, well, you can see it on convincing the people in the news that he's talking to, but also in the wider culture to show that there's legitimate, credible UFO stuff out there. So if he is a disinfo agent, then he's just sharing that there's credibility in the UFO field. He clarified this, gentleman, and he said, no, I think Lou Elizondo is. That's also a weird statement, I think, because Lou Elizondo is doing the same thing. He's sharing that there are legitimate cases out there. So, for instance, what is the one case that Lou Elizondo has been able to share and get out to the public? It's this Nimitz case. We know this one's legit because now, because it's gotten out there and because Lou has gotten out there, all of these witnesses are coming forward who were part of this 2004 Nimitz aircraft carrier incident where some jets from the Nimitz aircraft chased a tic-tac shaped and looking object. This has done wonders for, you know, it's been really kind of a watershed moment for ufology because now people are really paying attention to this credible UFO stuff. So that's what makes it really hard to say Elizondo is a disinfo agent in my mind. Now, Elizondo does believe that what he has done is revealed government UFO disclosure, that the government was into UFOs. And he doesn't believe really there's much more beyond what he's been doing because he's had no indication of that. I've also talked to other people with To the Stars who are also colleagues from intelligence, and they feel the same way. They feel very much that there's a real phenomena going on, but they just didn't see evidence of that. However, all of them admit that there could be things that they don't know. And that may be the case. Maybe they're not in the know if there is something more. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think it's interesting. And I love, for people to kind of challenge. Myself, I don't even believe that MJ-12 exists. Maybe that's why you think I'm part of MJ-12, that I'm covering it up. But you got to look at my story and look up my MJ-12 disinformation scandal. Look up disinformation scandal, and you'll find my story and my video on this to give you the history, and you can find all this information yourself. I give you all the sources. MJ-12, the first guy to mention it, was in a document that he said he hoaxed. Now, this guy was an Air Force Office of Special Investigations member when he did this. And he says he hoaxed these documents to make people think that things that the Air Force were doing were alien. That could be the case. I don't know. But regardless, MJ-12 first came to public knowledge in a admittedly hoax document. And you know what? All of the purporters of MJ-12 who talk about MJ-12 and everything never mention this. They neglect, and it's one of the frustrating things. That's why I work so hard to investigate it. They never talk about the origins of how we even came across MJ-12. So hopefully I'm doing a good job if I am an MJ-12er in keeping the secrets. But no, if I was MJ-12 member, I'd imagine I'd be getting a fat paycheck. That'd be great. And then I don't think I'd be wasting my time doing this. I'd be on the beach. Actually, I would be doing this because I get so compelled to do it. So no, I'm not MJ-12. Nick Pope's not MJ-12. Luis Elizondo is in MJ-12. Nobody's MJ-12 because it doesn't exist. In my humble opinion, and according to my research where I share my sources with you all. So that was a lot of fun. All right, let's go back to other stories. So we were talking about Nick Pope there and all of this cool stuff, but let's go back to the homepage and look at some of these other headlines because there's some important news. This is just a really exciting and important time in this field, and here's one of the reasons why. And this isn't even new, if you guys have been listening to this show, we've been talking about this type of a thing going on for quite some time. This is weird, maybe because it's in the middle of the screen. My eyes go to marijuana. How crazy is that? And the top news topic is at boston.com. Marijuana is one of the top news topics. I guess that shouldn't be too surprising. In the International UFO Congress store, one of the popular items that is sold is any of our items where there's a picture of an alien smoking marijuana. So there's a little piece of news for you. But this story is actually a Washington Post story, and I have that link here. But as you can see, the Washington Post, oh wow, that link didn't even work this time. But it is behind a paywall. So if you try to look at this story, they'll make you pay for it. So that's why I put a link to this story, because it's not behind a paywall, so you can read the entire thing. But it is the Washington Post story here. And this is about a scientist. As you could read here, Harvard's top astronomer says alien ship may be among us, and he doesn't care what his colleagues think. So this guy is one of the scientists. His name is Avi Loeb. He's one of the scientists that was suggesting that object that came in from space, that Oumuamua, which we talked about, was alien. And he's still saying it could have been alien. We don't know. This thing came in, it went around the sun. It's the first time we've had an extrasolar object come in and circle the sun like this. Extrasolar meaning it is outside of our solar system. Really, we have comets and asteroids that do come close to the sun and then zip away, but they're usually in an orbit, sometimes a humongous orbit, and we won't see them for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years before they come back around the sun. But this thing came from somewhere else, was pulled in by the Earth, by the sun's gravity, whipped around the sun, and then it's gone. It's not coming back. It is headed out. But the speed at which it moved away, other movements indicate that there is some sort of mysterious propulsion that we don't understand. A lot of scientists have said, well, it's just the way the sun hit it, that the makeup of this thing, probably the sun pushed it away, which is possible, if not probable. But Avi Loeb is saying, we don't know. It could have been alien. He doesn't even have weird hair like Giorgio, and he's saying this. But so it's created kind of a stir. There are some of people, and the thing is, he's extremely well respected. So nobody's calling him a crazy, nor would they dare to. Instead, they're saying, you know what? He's just challenging us. It's like he does in class. He puts across these theories, and we've got to prove them or disprove them, and it teaches us how to do science. That's probably what he's doing, is what some of them say. Some of them say, so there's all these things, and why is he saying this stuff? Although some people are saying, and we've seen this before, and what he's essentially saying is, we just can't discount that there could be extraterrestrial civilizations out there. In fact, he has something he calls the cosmic, let's see, it's here somewhere, cosmic modesty, which is the idea that it's arrogant to assume we are alone in the universe or even a particularly special species. Now, I believe that all of you watching and all of my podcast listeners and all of my readers are very special. But the rest of humanity, not very special. No, what essentially he's saying here is that, and it makes a lot of sense, in nature we see everything repeated. If you see one dog, most likely there's other dogs. If you see one plant, most likely there's more of that species around. And we see, if you see one plant, there's probably different plants. So everything's repeated. We see there is tons and tons of everything. So most likely other planets have plants. Most likely other planets have everything we have here. And most likely there are other planets, and according to Drake's equation and other equations, many, many countless planets have intelligent civilizations such as ours, if you want to call ours quote-unquote intelligent. So what they're saying there is that most likely there are other intelligent civilizations. We're not as special as we think. There's no way we're the only ones. So this idea of talking about aliens, maybe it's Giorgio's fault. Giorgio's gotten everybody thinking aliens. But this idea that aliens could be visiting us, that there are other civilizations out there, is really gone mainstream, and mainstream scientists are talking like this. Of course, many of us are thinking, yeah, they should have been there to begin with, because there's no good reason to make fun of it or poo-poo the whole idea. But it's just an incredible time for this field and for this idea, because everybody's taking all of this much more seriously, which was the opposite when I got involved in this in the 90s. That was the worst of the worst, where they were just making fun of it. You couldn't have it. Even the UFO shows would debunk everything in the last 5-10 minutes of the show that they just presented to you. It was terrible, people. It was bad. But it's all changing. This is extraordinary. Here's another piece of news that is related, this third story, and this is a video of Avi Loeb actually talking about why the universe may be full of alien civilizations. And he's talking about how advanced civilizations, where they may move to, where they may explore in order to survive, and essentially saying, just like it says, there could be tons of alien civilizations out there. So also a really interesting piece of news that everybody should watch. Otherwise, let's see what else we got here. Robert Zemeckis' UFO show Project Blue Book headed to the UK. So many of you are from the UK. I hear from a lot of UK listeners that are really frustrated when they read my reviews that they can't watch the show themselves. And I'm so sorry you can't watch it, but it looks like the Sci-Fi Channel is bought the show, and now you guys in the UK are gonna be able to see it. So like I said, hey, send them texts, send them emails, tell them, hey, you want to see the show. That must have been effective because now in the UK, you're going to be able to see Project Blue Book. I think you're going to like it. I like it. For the most part, I mean, sure, it is a kind of a bummer, and some people have said it'd be nice if they stuck to the facts, really. And it would, because UFO sightings are exciting. But I guess producers especially don't think they're that exciting, so you need to add all this fiction. And they are adding a lot of exciting fiction and stuff like that in there, so I don't know. It is a fun show, and I think the actors are good. I really like the guy who plays Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Travis Parker and Tom DeLonge used to look for UFOs together. According to the drummer for Blink-182, Tom DeLonge used to say, hey, dude, let's get high and go look for UFOs. So this was an interview with Joe Rogan that he did. He said that they used to get high and look for UFOs. That was like a big thing for Tom DeLonge that he would do. When asked, well, what do you think? Are they real, or do you think there's really ETs? And he says, yeah, I'm a believer. I really think there are UFOs. So I used to have fun looking at UFOs with him, but he says, I wouldn't quit my job with Blink-182 to spend my life looking for UFOs like Tom DeLonge has, which is essentially what Tom DeLonge did. I mean, and as much as people love to bash Tom DeLonge, which I think is not a good thing, because, I mean, look at, really, we wouldn't have, Lou Elizondo wouldn't be out, and if it wasn't for Tom DeLonge. I'll try to shorten the story to justify what I just said. Essentially, Tom DeLonge created To the Stars when Lou Elizondo retired. To the Stars individuals who were also, had worked with Bigelow. And Bigelow, of course, had worked with ATIP, and so they knew of Elizondo. Word got around that Elizondo was retiring, so they said, hey, Lou, do you want to join To the Stars? He said, sure, that's awesome. That's what I want to do. Investigate UFOs and get that out to the public. So he joined To the Stars, and it was through To the Stars that he was able to share what he used to do and to get this news out. So really, Tom DeLonge got all of this out. So it's we owe him a token of gratitude, if you ask me. Plus, he's a cool guy. I've talked to him several times. He's a lot of fun. He's really very passionate. He's a really nice, really cool guy. So this is funny. And Tom DeLonge quit being a rock star to investigate UFOs. Of course, his drummer buddy's like, I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know why he did that. But you and I, who are passionate about this topic, are like, yeah, that's what I'd do too. Once you've had all the partying and money, let's just spend time looking for UFOs. This is good and bad, so I want to talk about this for a couple reasons. So the Blair Witch Project creator returns with Skyman, a found footage UFO docudrama. Is that good or bad? It's probably, I don't know. If you like horror movies and stuff like that, it'll probably be good because it's going to be another fun UFO. Although we've seen this before where it's found footage. So found footage is where, we found this camera of Lucy's, and the last we ever heard of Lucy is she called her mom and said, I'm being chased by aliens in the forest, and nobody ever found her. But we found her phone, and on her phone is this 2-hour video of her going into the forest with her friends and making out with her boyfriend and then getting chased by aliens, and they all get killed, and all we found was her phone. And, that's a age-old story. So it looks like there's going to be another one of those stories. The bad is, often with these movies, they try to market the whole event as real. So they'll tell you, oh yeah, Lucy was real. They'll get these people who look like experts who will say, this is real. Everything that happened to Lucy was real. And then they'll try to get these news stories, or they'll put videos out there of clips of maybe, I'm Lucy's sister, some girl crying. And then everybody in the UFO community, well, not everybody, but many people are falling for it. And they're like, oh my gosh, did you hear about Lucy? No, this is movie marketing. So be careful. If they do that, don't fall for it. And of course, I'll be here to tell you, okay, this isn't real. I told you months ago this was going to happen, and here's some evidence on how it wasn't real. So that's why I wanted to share that with you all. This is some interesting news. The site of the alleged 1947 UFO crash changes hands. Again, this could be good. This could be bad. We've got Open Minds pictures of all this because we've been there. Now, this shed is allegedly where they kept some of the material. This was on the Foster Ranch at the time in 1947. The material was found by Mac Brazel, one of the first Air Force official to play with this material was Jesse Marcel, and Jesse Marcel was the intelligence officer, and they kept that material in this shed in this house here, allegedly. And you can see this because actually there's a fence line not too far from here. In fact, not very far at all. And there's a road here you can drive on as you go to the debris field. Now, I'm not going to show you the location. Sorry. But, and I don't think it might not be that hard to find. But, you know, don't want to get it all trampled on and everything. And I'd be defying the wishes of some of my friend researchers in the area. But how might this be bad? Well, the owner is a cattle company that's buying this whole thing. And they're not buying it from the Fosters. They had sold it a long time ago. So it's all these companies that buy it. I guess my fear is that they turn it into some kind of tourist destination, which I guess is bound to happen at some point, where they just change everything and people come out here tromping all over the place. So that's the only fear I have, but just an interesting story that came out from my friends at the Roswell Daily Record. And I've written for them quite a bit. Finally, our last bit of UFO news. This is really not UFO, but it's kind of space conspiracy, and it's fun. Soviet secrets. Are there dead cosmonauts in orbit above Earth? Bum, bum, bum. Maybe. So if you read this story, it's a great story from FighterSuite.com, a kind of a jet fighter-oriented website. And you'll notice in these images, somebody's missing. What the heck? There's this picture, and that person's missing. What? So you know who figured this out was James Oberg, that same scientist who busted that Ken Johnston story wide open, you know, that I was talking about earlier. James Oberg, told you he's a famous space scientist. He noticed that in the Soviet pictures, some of their old archival photos were not the same as some of their newer photos. That apparently they were able to airbrush out, and this had to be physically done by like artists to take these out of negatives because this is before Photoshop, and they removed some individuals in their pictures of astronauts. Now, that has caused some to believe that perhaps there were astronauts who died in space and the Soviets covered this all up. Well, in Oberg's investigation, he found that the Soviets said no. Actually, these were people who either disgraced themselves, so they were fired from the program, or they got sick and weren't able to go into space, and we didn't want the public to know, so we changed the photographs. Russia is not like America, that is more media-oriented, and most media is state-ran, and some of you may agree, but quite frankly, you would be a little off. And that, a lot of journalists are very independent in the United States, and we, self-police quite a bit, where if you fake stuff, you're just going to get lit up. You're in big trouble. You're getting fired. I mean, all your colleagues who are dying to take you down, in some cases, will do so. So what happened is that James Oberg found, okay, it seems like the Soviets are accurate. But there are some researchers, at least some cases, like in this case where these Italian brothers had the Giudica Cordiglia brothers. They were listening to signals from Soviet space programs. And there were times when they got SOS signals. And some of these were distress calls where they were able to supposedly record that some people, including Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, his best friend, died in orbit. So that there were people, perhaps Soviet cosmonauts that are in space right now, that died in space, and Russia has never admitted to that because they didn't want any black marks on their program. So it's a very interesting article. I thought you might just like a piece of intrigue related to James Oberg regarding some space conspiracies. So that's why I shared that story. Really interesting story, I think. But let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Blair Witch is an alien, somebody said. That's an interesting one. Let's see. What else are you guys talking about? Any questions? I don't see any questions currently. Somebody's talking about Killjoy. They like that show. Rogan is a smart guy that believes a lot of dumb stuff. Let's see. Oh, somebody said, I just realized that they've never seen aliens running. That sounds kind of funny. That would be funny. I'd imagine that they'd kind of float. Remember the X-Files when they thought they saw an alien? The Simpsons X-Files episode, and they just kind of floated in the forest, and it turned out to be Mr. Burns on drugs or something like that. But let's see. So that is about it. Thank you all so much for joining. Be sure to check out ufocongress.com for that blog and those pieces of those little cool stuff on the website. Having a hard time talking now. Look, the links to the products and stuff. And then also, if you haven't seen this video, you definitely got to check this out with Lou. I think it's one of the best interviews out there. So some of these were my questions, but we also took questions from all of you all. And so some of them might be your questions. I think some of them were some of your questions that you were listening. So those were the questions that we asked. In fact, I've got a plethora of questions from you all again to ask Lou when I interview him in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, check that out. Of course, always check out openminds.tv. And you can also find a lot of my news and information right here on AlejandroTRojas.com, including my non-UFO stuff. Like, what's the Space Force? So, thank you all so much for joining me this week. I'm going to put on my little end screen here so I can put some other cool videos over there. And you can click that button down there to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Please do check out the podcast. And you've got all the links to all of that stuff below. Please subscribe. And then hit that little bell down there next to the subscription thing under the video. Because then you'll be notified every time I have a new video. And you're not going to want to miss them. So until next time, peace.